taught me to care for the present because I gotta be honest with myself. History was an escape for me in the past. Like people talk about fantasy novels. I like them because that's how I forget about my shitty reality. I was the same, by the way. The only difference being that I was a teenager when I escaped into fantasy novels. I wasn't freaking 30. I think it's a sign of becoming adult when you go from escaping into fantasy to escaping into history. But anyway, in the few recent years, I really turned into a self-taught historian, mainly in the classical world and less so when it comes to the medieval, the Renaissance, and modern times. But a historian all the same. But as time passed, I did realize it was for the wrong reasons. History is meant to teach us about our mistakes and how to improve our current state of being, but I only used it as a fantasy novel, basically, which I guess is not a mistake by definition, it's just how your interest naturally develops into something more useful. I came to this realization gradually, but the initial reality slap, I think, came to me when I first came across it was a quote by Ovidius, the Roman poet. So the basic outline for him is that he was a famous poet during the golden age of Emperor Augustus. And this happened to be the historical period I was the most maniacal about. So here I am one day reading all the Augustan stuff, from the geography and archaeology to the military, the economy of the period, the religion, arts, poetry, and whatever else I used to come across concerning this period. It just fascinated me. I was totally enamored by it. And every single day of my life, I worked 8 hours with the thought of coming home and burying myself in the Augustan books. And it was one of those regular evenings when I came across Ovidius and his life and his works. And I read this quote from him. It went like, "Let others praise ancient times. I'm glad I was born in these." Uh, and I suddenly looked up from the book and at the realization that these words were spoken 2,000 years ago. And here I am, living in my own actual times, but staying forever buried in books about a world that died 20 freaking centuries ago. Uh, at first, I got into this initially, overblown reaction to myself having become an obsessed nut job, but eventually I started analyzing the situation, and I came to the conclusion that I'm describing right now, that it was all natural and actually useful to my life, and I don't have any serious socializing issues, or do I? I don't know. I made this huge pivot of the use of my interest in history. I started to try and discipline myself into reading not only what was interesting for me and completely useless, but what was maybe not 100% mind blowing and yet way more useful for my future development. Unlike my being maniacal about, let's say, the remaining podium and the columns of the Temple of Mars in the Forum of Augustus in Rome, I used to look at pictures of that for freaking hours. Can you imagine? So, yes, I imposed discipline upon my passion. And as it turned out, mania is manageable and even blooming with a little bit of discipline. I couldn't even imagine that I would become just as maniacal about the Byzantine Empire, about the Renaissance, about England and France and China and eventually USA history. I became completely enamored, and my combo of love and disciplined love, let's say, finally actually led me to the world that I live in. Nowadays, I'm interested in modern politics, economy, basically the world now. And maybe in a sweet and simple way, I have to thank Ovidius for that. So, thanks, man.